It is the April
April
3rd.
3rd, 2024 Zoom meeting of the Northborough Fire Station Building Committee. This open meeting of the Fire Station Building Committee is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency signed into law on March 29, 2023. All members of the Fire Station Building Committee are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The act allows the Fire Station Building Committee to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. So, for the Fire Station Building Committee, Mitch Cohen,
I'm here.
Tom Reardon,
Can't hear you, Tom. You're muted.
I am here.
Diana Nicholas,
Here.
Dan Brillhart,
Here.
Chief Dave Parenti,
I'm here.
and Chair Don Rand. So all members are present. And also attending, would you notify us if you're attending? Janet?
You're muted. Yeah.
Here I am.
There
Okay, can
you
you hear
go.
me?
There we
Okay,
go.
I'm here, sorry.
And Amy?
I'm here.
And Tim?
Yes.
Enjoy.
Oh, and John? John Rappa?
Here.
Okay, and John Rapper is not a member of the Fire Station Building Committee and is not voting on any matters that the Fire Station Building Committee may vote on, as he is a member of the Financial Planning Committee, and that Chapter 52, Section 1-52-010 prohibits a member of the Financial Planning Committee from serving on another town committee. Financial Planning Committee has approved him as the liaison to the Fire Station Building Committee. Okay. So the first on our agenda is calling this meeting to order. And now we're going to review and approve the minutes from the March 11th, 2024 meeting. Does anybody have any comments or a motion?
Make a motion, we approve as presented.
A second.
Motion's been made and seconded.
Roll
Okay,
call.
roll call. Tom,
Here. Aye. Yes.
Diana,
I abstain on that one.
Mitch,
Aye.
Dan,
Aye.
Chief,
Aye.
and I. Review and approve the minutes from the March 27th, 2024 meeting. Do I hear a motion or any comments?
General comments, it's tough to, I know Lorraine is trying to be as accurate as possible. And I'm not saying she was inaccurate by any means, but the level of detail, as you get more detail in meeting minutes, it introduces questions. Oh, did I really mean this? There's something that says I insisted. I didn't really insist. I stressed. I'm not going to suggest that we change it. My only suggestion is, because we do have video recordings of all of our meetings, that maybe the meeting minutes be simplified a little bit, might make it a little bit easier on Lorraine. And if people really want to get the full context, rather than relying upon the meeting minutes, which aren't transcripts anyway, they could just watch the video. My only input.
Okay, the chief has noted that. Okay, so do I hear a motion?
Move
Motion to
approve.
accept.
I'll second.
Second,
Seconded by Mitch.
okay. Tom,
Yes.
Diana,
Yes.
Mitch,
Aye.
Dan,
Aye.
Chief Parenti,
Aye.
John Rand, aye. Okay, that brings us to the discussion and the vote on the HVAC cannabis system. We were kind of tied as far as voting last time, and we've had a little additional input from Sean Thompson. So I think the chief would update us on that.
Yeah, so I think you all saw that Sean's input. He is a fan of option 2. He is not a big fan of the geothermal for a couple of reasons. One of which is his history with the senior center. And he knows this new one we're talking about is a different system, and I understand that, and he understands that. But his big concern really is finding someone to work on it. long-term. They have, even the people he spoke with, who have, been working on the senior center, aren't available very often to work on it. And he included all you in that response that he sent out. With that in mind, and I also have some, I'll be very honest, I talked about this before. I have concerns with Jason had input as well. Did you guys all see Jason's input?
I don't know if you forwarded that out.
Mitch, since you were going back and forth, can you go ahead and maybe
Sure.
summarize?
Yeah, I mean, we had asked two questions. I posed them, I sent them to the chief, he shared them with Jason. And they were, one, you have any experience with these type of rebate programs, Mass Save and the federal one on geothermal. And two, some general questions about how we might be able to, if we went with the geothermal, how we might be able to use that dollar amount best, so we didn't have to bond the extra $2 million over 20 or 30 years and then have to pay that back with interest. On the first, he said, he confirmed we've done Mass Save many times. He's familiar with that program. And on the federal one, it's relatively new, so he hasn't done it yet. But I sent him links to documents from the IRS and the Department of Energy on that law, which was signed into law a couple of years ago. And he didn't really opine any particular way on that. And then on the financial, we posed a couple of options. The one that he preferred, which makes sense to me, is if we have a reasonable expectation of a certain dollar amount coming in by the time you need to bond the project, just don't put that other dollar amount on the 20 or 30-year bond. Continue that with a ban or short-term borrowing if you need to. And then when that money comes in, you're legally required to use it against that anyway, and just use it to pay that off immediately. That way you're not borrowing on that $2 million over a period of 20 years. You're paying that off quick. He certainly expressed the desire, as I think we'd all would, that we would get that money back before we'd have to bond the project. That's impossible to predict, not only the timing of both Mass Save and the IRS, but how and when he would choose to bond the project will depend on things that are completely outside of our control, interest rates and things like that. Sometimes you bond a project at the very beginning if the interest rates happen to be temporarily low. Sometimes you wait until you're completely done. Sometimes you do it in a couple of different pieces. Sometimes you wait and do it in collaboration with another project. There are a lot of unpredictable things there, and that have nothing to do with geothermal or anything else. Chief, does that seem to summarize?
Yeah, I think that summarizes it fairly well. There was one word that he used that he talked about. The path he would choose depended on the certainty of the grant payment.
Mm-hmm.
And which brought me back to the discussion we had last time, where I said I was concerned there wasn't, the Mass Saves, I'm pretty sure I'm not concerned about that. I'm pretty sure that's going to be there. It's not going to change. The federal one, I'm a little bit more concerned about.
It's federal law. So it's not a White House policy. So it's not something that can change if the presidency changes. It would need to require federal legislation to change that law. And the only reason that this is in place is there was a panic about the economy, and everybody got together and we're on one happy page about the Inflation Reduction Act, which included a lot of green energy subsidies and other things, and this is one of them.
Completely understand that.
What's that?
While I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree with the basis of what you're saying, I also know what the government's been like for the last several years. And I'll be very honest with you, Mitch, nothing would surprise me if things change as far as who has power in the House or who has power in the Senate or who has the White House. I said last time I was concerned with that. I'm still concerned with that. I put a ton of weight into what the person who has to maintain the system has to say, which is he prefers option 2. And I really think I'm not comfortable going to the people and saying, we want this much money and we intend on getting the money back through these 2 programs. and then it not happen.
As I said, it's a federal law. It's not going to change easily by any means. It would require a 2/3 vote in the Senate and or 60% vote in the Senate, as well as the House, as well as the president's signature to change that. I don't see that happening in the next year.
You and I are gonna have to agree to disagree, because
Yeah.
I see executive orders being a possibility to change anything.
The executive order cannot change the law.
Because it's been used for lots of different things, Mitch. And I'm not gonna argue the point. I understand you. I understand what you're saying. I just have my opinion.
My opinion is this is the least expensive option by a pretty good amount. Even if for some reason the federal tax went away, the energy savings over the long term clearly makes up for that anyway, and it still becomes the least expensive over the long term. But it's with the laws that are in place now that I can't imagine they would change in the next year. This is the least expensive option. I'm
Do you
happy
put
to
any
present
weight
that
into
to
Sean's
the-
concerns?
His concern was primarily that when he looked for someone to repair the open loop system at the senior center, he had trouble finding somebody to do that. It's a different system. Doesn't concern me. With this being a federal subsidy, it's a 30% tax credit for residential and it's 25.5% for municipal. There are going to be a lot more of these systems going in there. There are going to be a lot of installers looking to get on board with this. I'm not concerned.
Yes, I agree with Mitch. I'm very much in favor of pursuing the geothermal. I understand Sean's concern about upkeep and maintenance, but as more and more of these more advanced and sophisticated systems come online, like the one at the Fales School in Westboro that's 3 or 4 years old, there are plenty of people to maintain and operate these systems. And, the cost savings, town's commitment as a stretch code community to pursue energy savings and cost-effective programs, I think I'm very much in support of the geothermal option.
Amy.
No, Amy.
I just, after the last meeting, and there was a little bit of concern about how many contractors might be able to service the system, I did reach out to the HVAC engineer, Dom, and asked him what his opinion was. And if I could just read you something from his email. He said, with a closed loop well field, there should be less of a concern for maintaining the wells, and qualified HVAC mechanical companies should be able to maintain the system. However, there are fewer wellfield contractors that can provide the installation, and due to the renewed interest in geothermal, the availability of qualified wellfield contractors able to do the job has lessened because of the increased demand for geothermal, which tends to also drive the price up. So he was suggesting that you probably wouldn't have a problem servicing it in the future, but there just might be a problem with finding a contractor to install it.
I assume he put that cost consideration into mind when he provided the estimate, correct?
I would assume so, but I don't know. He was looking at current, or what they had been seeing currently. So, we never know what's going to happen in the future exactly.
As long as he is.
Amy, I have a question about Dom's comment in that, wouldn't the geotechnical installation team be hired by the GC? I mean, if people are going to bid on the work, they presumably have gotten a number from a qualified firm or 3, right?
Yeah, I mean, so they will, so when you say the geotechnical team, are you talking about like PAR, who we're using
No,
right now?
the installation team that Dom was saying, there are fewer contractors who are able to install the initial system.
Right. So
Correct?
they would be bidding on the project. And so it would be, the responsibility of the general contractor to find somebody to install it. Yes.
Right. Now I understand the footnote, why that might drive the
Yes.
costs up.
Right.
But as Mitch is saying, presumably our estimator is aware of that scenario. Well, actually, Dom's giving us prices. We haven't fully vetted that, but that would be, I assume, part of, I mean, he must be basing this on actual pricing that they're seeing at the moment.
Yes, that's what he said. He was basing it on the pricing
So-
that they're seeing at the moment. And he made this comment. So I would assume he factored all of that in when he put the price together. I'm just saying we don't know, what the future holds, obviously, where costs could go.
I will say though that the private market is slowing down.
Yes.
And so the private market has more geotherm right now than the public sector and what I've seen. So I do think that while there might be seemingly a shortage, or there has been in the last year, it's possible that that's going to be less of an issue by the time this goes out for bid, unfortunately, in terms of the reality of, the economy.
Yeah, it
Are
might be.
these filed sub bids, either plumbing or mechanical, Amy? There's a geothermal
Not for
fall.
not for the well field drilling. That's
Not for the
not,
drilling.
yeah, not for the
Everything
drilling.
else, but everything else connected. Right. So just the drilling, I just want to make that clear, just the drilling
don't
belongs to
think-
the
I don't
GC,
think
but
so.
I'm asking the question. I don't know the answer to this one, so.
Well, but if it's 10, it's tricky because it's 10 feet beyond the building technically in terms of the plumbing scope, but it
Right.
might not also be, it's also not outside of the 10 feet.
Right. That's why I'm
Madam-
asking, so.
Madam Chair, question? May I ask a question, Madam Chair?
Done.
I do recall in Dom's presentation, he said that what's not included in these numbers is a consultant to design the well field. So that would be extra, number one. And number two, I got to think that the very first thing you can do in terms of critical path is drill these 650 foot deep wells before you do anything else in terms of just the critical path of the project on site.
It is an early, it would be construction logistically, it would be an early activity. You would get your wells drilled, you would get your base piping in. You grout the wells, you would run your piping to wherever your pump station is. And that would all be done by your site guy or whoever you're hiring to install this. And then it would transition to your HVAC contractor who would take it basically from the inside and then connect it to all their equipment and their heat exchangers and that type of thing. So, there may be slightly different, or it might be different based on whatever the design might be, but that's where they're kind of, there's a transition between the site work being done by a site contractor that the general contractor would hire and a filed sub bidder for mechanical systems.
Tim, do you have an opinion?
Do I have an opinion of the system? I think a closed system is obviously much more reliable than an open system that you have in town. I do think this is it's a trend that certainly a lot of people are moving in this direction. I do think that there probably will be more contractors that will be able to service this. I think if you think about the serviceability of a system, and again, my knowledge, I'm not an engineer, so I'm not fully versed in this, but it's a lot of pumps and heat exchangers. It's not a lot of moving parts. So it may be a reduced maintenance than what you would have on a traditional system.
Todd?
Todd's not going to say anything. Todd, you got any input?
No.
Not on this, I don't.
Dan does.
Dan?
One of the things that I'm concerned about is just the price. The upfront price going in front of the taxpayer, for which I'm one, and seeing that number included in the price. Now, knowing the rebates and that kind of thing, it's just that price is out there, and so that I'm concerned about the upfront cost at town meeting and at the polls.
And I concur with what you've just said.
Doesn't particularly concern me. There are plenty of projects that towns put forward that have larger differential between the total project cost and the net cost to the town. Every school project we do, the library construction project, are two that have some very large differentials.
Chief?
I agree with you. I gave you my opinion. it's such a difficult, to me, I know this shouldn't be a difficult decision, but it is. And it is because I think going green is a great idea. I think anything we can do to save the money going forward is a great idea. I think if the system works the way it's intended, and from what everyone's telling me, that's really good. I can't disagree with Captain Brillhart saying, and Mitch, while I know what you're saying is accurate, when we have a town meeting, there's gonna be, what, a couple hundred people there, and then there's gonna be several thousand that are voting. Hopefully, we'll see. Those several thousand wouldn't have been at the town meeting to hear and understand this is the amount, but we're gonna get this much back. You know, so yes, you're gonna see that $2,000 or that $2 million bump on as we vote on it, but you don't have to worry about that because we're getting it back over here. I think that's what Dan's concern is, and I don't disagree with that. I could be wrong. I don't know.
I just don't want to lose the project.
I know Diana's had her hand up, but I'll quickly respond to that. At the ballot, the dollar amount does not go on the ballot for a debt exclusion. It certainly does at town meeting, and that's the opportunity to discuss that. I've presented, not in Northborough, but in another town, projects that had some very large differentials, and you put that up on a slide, it's easily understood.
I agree with you, and I know it's not on the ballot. That's not my question, but it's really irrelevant. It's on the ballot because you can bet your butt that everyone who's going to vote knows what that number is. They're not going to vote just because of what it says. They're going to know what that dollar number is that we're putting out.
There are also a lot of people that are going to be very excited about having an energy efficient building.
It's highly possible.
That's going to draw some people in.
Diana?
This is a question that's just, I'm just still mulling finding the right contractors situation. So I have a question for Tim. Are we planning on pre-qualifying the filed subbidders?
Question.
So you would have a mechanical contractor that you would have to pre-qualify. Anything over $10 million, publicly funded project, you were required to go through the pre-qualification process. So
I thought that was optional in 149.
Below 10 million, it's optional.
Right.
Okay.
That's correct.
So then we would have the ability then to, in the qualification process, make sure that we have a mechanical contractor who's experienced in closed loop installations.
Yes,
right?
that said, the pre-qualification process, although intended, its intent when it was put into practice, was to allow the town or the awarding authority to kind of weed out contractors that they don't feel are responsible and have the qualifications to do the project. But in reality, it's really tough. So we'll do what we can to make that a requirement that they have that. But the state, they try and be as inclusive as they can, and so they make it difficult to sometimes enforce that intent of the pre-qualification process.
Okay, so it's really in your court to write the pre-qualification solicitation in that way.
Yeah,
No pressure, but yeah, I get it.
We can talk for hours about that.
Yes, we can.
But,
We don't have to, but it does give me a little bit more comfort in the installation.
yeah, for sure that we would put that in as a requirement and try and put that in as that their references should be from previous projects where they did install geothermal systems.
Thank you.
Comments? Hearing none. Here's that we're at 3-3. Tom?
So with all the residents of Northborough participating in Mass Save programs, I think the knowledge of this rebates as well as the IRA programs is more widespread than we were assuming. And I'm comfortable that we could educate enough people so we don't have this misunderstanding that this $2 million is definitely in the project. I see it as my work as a building inspector in Westboro. We have tons of solar systems. We're now getting more geothermal. We're getting a ton of air source heat pumps. So there's a higher level of knowledge about these programs in amongst the residents of the surrounding towns in Northborough. So I don't think it's that much of a risk. I think if we keep holding these public meetings, putting the word out, explaining it clearly, I'm comfortable with that.
Anyone else?
Madam Chair, a question, please.
Yes.
The option number 3, the geothermal option is 10% of the current budget we're talking about, before you get to any rebates or incentives. The townspeople are going to look at what's the bottom line. They're not going to care about, green or incentives. What's the bottom line? What's it going to cost me? We need to be able to articulate that clearly and defend it clearly to move this project forward.
Thank you. We were to take a vote now, it'd probably be a 3-3 vote. I think we start with taking a vote now and then see if we can compromise.
I'll make a motion that we use the geothermal system as presented.
I second that.
Motion's been made and seconded. Okay, Tom,
I agree.
Diana,
I support the geothermal option.
Mitch,
Option 1, sorry, 3.
Dan,
Go ahead.
I will go with 3. But Mitch is gonna sell it.
okay, Chief,
I don't like this at all. I'm gonna be very honest with you. I'm going to have to agree because I don't think we're gonna get anywhere if I don't to go with 3. But I agree with Dan. This is not something I'm comfortable selling to people. If the 3 of you are comfortable selling and are able to do, I can't do it anyway once we get to a certain point, as you guys, I assume you know. We're working on putting together a program to get information out there to people so they know what's going on. The 3 of you better be ready to get letters and emails from myself and the deputy asking for support. I'm not, not a threat. I'm just I need that information. You know what I mean? If I would go with that. So that's where I sit.
so your vote's an affirmative?
Sure.
Okay, well, as somebody that's already got one geothermal system that didn't work in town, to her credit, I'm gonna vote no.
Okay.
I would go with it, in the spirit of compromising, but it's enough votes already that I'm gonna take the back seat on this one and say, no more geothermal for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. I understand
Okay.
that.
All right, so.
I
Motion
appreciate the debate and discussion on this. It was interesting, and I learned a lot from some of the comments from particularly Tom and Diana on the process that I wasn't aware of before.
All right, so
Do we need to discuss the PV system at the same time, folks? I'm asking Tim and Amy and Janet, or is that?
separate.
Well, certainly we will have the building ready for it, but I'll defer to Amy and Janet if that's something that you think we need to incorporate into the design at this point.
Janet, I can't remember what you put for a timeline for that.
I don't think you put it as an immediate.
Yeah, sure. Okay. I'm gonna check on that one. Let's just see.
If I recall.
Oh, it did not come up as a question, so we didn't comment on
We
it.
didn't comment.
We're PV ready. I mean, for instance, we made Ashland, for instance, PV ready, and we didn't add the PV until the building was occupied and they had the $500,000 or whatever available to them through their budget and savings and whatever they didn't spend, and then they were able to purchase it, so it was ready. They didn't pay the engineering costs, right, Amy? Till after the fact as well. So they didn't do the engineering. We just were PV
Yes.
ready.
Yes,
So-
that they added that very late in the process, which I
Very late.
wouldn't advise.
Wouldn't
I mean, they-
recommend that, but it
Yeah.
has happened.
They made the decision to add that during construction and fairly late in construction. I
Right.
mean, I think you have some time, but I wouldn't advise waiting that long.
So we can discuss, I just didn't know if it had to be discussed tonight. If not, I'd rather wait anyway, because
No.
I
No,
know
it
one of the
doesn't.
things,
No.
I remember where I saw, we were talking about the monitors. And if the monitors came off, then it had to be flat mounted. That's where I was thinking PV, because I remember having that discussion.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, the PV could be put on racks or, at an angle if we needed to. I mean, it would not probably look as good, certainly, but there are other ways to mount a solar array than laying them flat or attaching them to a roof. So just bringing that up. I just did an installation where we actually had an existing building and we had to get access to the roof in the future. So we built up a structure. And so the PV sits about 9 or 10 feet off the roof line. And the PV array sits up the top, and actually, gets maxed out the area of the roof. We didn't have to worry about anything that was sitting on there. So, anyhow, I think you can do it later, but you don't have to make a decision tonight for
Okay.
sure. So,
Great.
That sounds fine. Next item on our agenda is the budget discussion.
So I put the budget discussion on, folks, because a bunch of you sent me the questions. I sent them to the design team. They answered them. I sent it back to me, and I sent them back out to you guys. So I was hoping you had time to review them. I didn't know if there was follow-ups, if there was some clarification that was needed on some of the answers, if you were okay with all the answers. So I thought, since they were going to be here, it'd be great. And the meeting I was going to move along fairly quickly, at least the first section I was hoping. I threw it on the agenda for that reason.
Okay, so follow-up questions.
Yeah, I have not had time to review the responses from John's questions.
I do want to point out, if you haven't looked at it, there's your everyone's question. It has been put in somewhat in categories so that, several people asked monitors. I put the same monitor question. If you wrote the monitor, there might be several in a row. See the previous one. There's a response, and then there's a critical path. And the critical path is the one that has like 2 weeks, 2 weeks, you have a time frame that you have to make a decision by, or it affects us, it affects the engineers, whoever. So you'll see those. If it doesn't have a critical path, it doesn't. And we have a couple that say decision immediate, like moving the building.
Right,
And
I
I
was going to
think-
mention those next. That was the
So-
next thing I was going to mention.
Yeah,
Oh.
so I don't think, I think we explained that, but again, it's still not, everybody hasn't had a chance to look at all of those questions, so.
So if there's no follow-up to the questions that were sent in and answered, I would like to at least hit those, because one of the things we asked for at the last meeting was, what do we need to make a decision on now? And we had asked Janet and Amy to put a list together that says, what do we need to decide on as soon as possible and what can wait? And I would just like to go over those real quick, if that's okay, Madam Chair.
It is.
So one of them was, as Janet said, would there are cost savings moving the building forward? That's a decision needs to be made immediate. It's already been approved by the ZBA, the setback has. I'm not in favor of that for numerous reasons. The biggest reason is a traffic issue. If we have to go out and every time we come back into that station, pull out into the street, I think it would be crazy. Anybody have any real heartache over that we need to?
No, I think it's a worthwhile question to ask. My real question was, what's the dollar value impact of that? So we have something to weigh against what is a legitimate safety issue. And I don't see, quickly looking through these questions and responses, I don't see dollar values, I don't think anywhere.
There's no
So-
dollar value. I don't know how to even quantify. I mean, if we move the building, we move the building. But I don't see how you quantify moving it a foot. It's just
Yeah.
the bigger the apron, the better for a fire department. If we could make it bigger, we would. So don't know how
During
to-
last, I'm remembering this now,
Yeah.
during our last meeting, when I asked that question, really the advantage, if you will, of moving it forward is then you would move the entire really site forward, and in
Mhm.
theory, wall would not need to be as high. And I think you estimated, it would just be a couple of feet difference.
Correct. Yes, correct.
At that point, that I could do I can't do the math in my head, but I can take a good guess that, at least from my perspective, yeah, it would save money that you could notice on paper, but it would not be worth the downsides, which are as the chief explained, with the design as now, the only time you would need to block traffic when a vehicle's return is for the ladder truck. With it moved forward, you would need to block traffic for many vehicles returning. And to me, that's not worth it. So I'm not concerned about the cost on that. With the monitors, I am. That's why I asked that question. So
The
we
monitor, yeah.
and there may be, I'm sure there are other things in there. These questions were asked for cost reasons, so
Right.
we could understand. And without having those numbers, I, from my perspective, there's no point in having a budget discussion without numbers.
I think, the
yeah.
issue is that what you're asking really is a VE process where, some additional design information is then generated and a second cost estimate is done on those items that you want numbers for. And that's a process that takes some time that we would have to work through with our cost estimator if you really want to go down that road. It's
Right.
not easy for us to just pull out numbers from the estimate and sort of quantify, if I take this out and I add this back in, what will that be? It requires a bit of a design effort to do.
Yeah, so for instance, on the monitors, they frame for the monitors in steel. Well, that hasn't been a separate line item. So we can't figure out in the tonnage of steel how that was integrated. Same with the way the roof is framed. If you take on a monitor, you're going to have to put all the insulation, all the roofing back. So is that a wash? Maybe. So we're talking about steel, but we don't have any way of pulling that steel out at this point. We'd again have to go back into design work. There's multiple ways to do an estimate, and one of them is to pick off every piece and try to figure out, like, if I take this piece on, sometimes we do that with buildings, like if we're doing a big public works facility, which we do, in the vehicle storage versus the maintenance versus whatever. You might say, what if I cut half of the building down? Sometimes we'll do the estimate based on whole building pieces, but not individual elements like that. It's just a very difficult way of doing an estimate.
I am very concerned about us not going through a VE process with this project.
We could do that. Well, I think we talked last time about having the next estimate in design development, at which time when we hand the drawings over to our cost estimator, we'll also be handing them over to Tim, Alex, who will send them out to his cost estimator. They'll reconcile it, and after that you would do a VE. That's when you would do a VE, because then
I'm not asking about moving the building. I'm comfortable saying no to that anyway.
Okay.
Perspective.
Okay.
But things like the roof monitors and there are 37 items on this list. Can we still make changes based on answers of most of those 37 items at that stage?
Well, like, are you talking about the exterior materials, for instance?
I'm talking about, there's a list of 37 things here.
Well, okay, so let's take the brick. Okay,
Yeah.
and if you really want to lessen the cost of the building, you are going to have to stop the design process. We're going to have to redesign. And so we shouldn't be moving into the design development completion phase.
Why does our schedule even exist without a VE process for some of these things? I've never been through a project like this before.
It's not a standard part of
it's not.
Massachusetts public procurement design processes. Doesn't mean you can't do it.
Yeah.
But when it happens, it is later in design than schematic design.
We never do VE. I mean, we rarely do VE at all. We
But
do
the other piece
reconciliation.
of VE that we're missing is that if you're doing value engineering, you are trying to bring the price down relative to an initially stated budget price, which we never stated. So that makes the VE process a little bit more challenging. I mean, do we need to take money out of the building? Yes, that would be great. We need to do that. But our committee has continued to approve the work that has been presented without specifically giving them a budget to design to. Because if they knew the budget at the beginning, then they would be able to say, okay, well, rough square footage numbers, that means you can't have a meeting space, or you can't, but without that, we don't have a benchmark that we're trying to target with the reduction.
So at this point, I think items VE, we can look at everything and big or small eventually. At this point, maybe we can identify a handful of larger items. Maybe the roof monitors are one of those items. And Janet and Amy, I don't know if we can go back to the estimator and say, look, we need to kind of an order of magnitude. We're not gonna, you know, if the structure and this, and then the roofing of the monitor and the system that makes that up is equal, you know, you add those 5 or 6 components and you come up with $600,000. What's it cost to infill in a roof in that area? I mean, we're not going to be able to go into, well, that impacts, you know, down the road, all the other dominoes, but at least maybe we can get a rough order of magnitude quickly from the estimator that would be able to provide at least some comfort for you, Mitch, to know that, okay, that's not really saving us anything. It's not something I want to do, or wow, that's more than I thought. That might be something that we want to pursue.
That's what I'm looking for.
So
Yeah.
like
And
moving the
to be
building
honest,
forward.
I like the roof monitors. They're expensive, and I want to weigh that for my own mind.
Yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons to all the different things we do. And one thing for sure is that anytime you're taking something out, we got to put it back. So we got to put a roof in where the monitors were. We got to, if we're moving the building forward and we're reducing the height of the wall in the back, if the wall is 30 feet and you're able to reduce it by 3 feet tall, you're not going to get 10% of the cost back.
Right.
It's a diminishing return, because you still have to be out there on site. You still have to be out there to mobilize the guy. Maybe it's, you know, a couple days less time to build it, but you're not going to see the same percentage of cost. So maybe there's items that we can take a look at, a few, and we can kind of give you, say, we think that if you do this, you could save in the neighborhood of 150,000 or 10,000 or whatever it might be. Is that?
Madam Chair,
Back to Diana's point, last week we did say we weren't coming in with a number to meet. We were saying that we wanted to build the best fire station we could, reasonably. So we never at any point said we had a certain monetary figure that we wanted.
So I think that's a quirk of our 5-year delay. Another one of many unfortunate quirks of our 5-year delay. That we had a budget in mind based on the end of feasibility when it was 18 and change. We all knew it was not going to be that because of the delay. If we had started right away, when I think we really should have, then that would have been our budget. That would have been our expectation, is to keep it around that number. And that's more a commentary and frustration. I think we're all frustrated the fact that we're doing this 5 years later than we should have.
Madam Chair, comment?
Yes.
I had commented in the notes I had sent out that I believe the operational readiness and the health and safety of the staff is the paramount objective here, number one. Number two, any state laws, regulatory requirements, safety, building codes, etc., are number two, and everything after that is optional.
Can I comment on that? I agree with those 2 points, but the third component is that all the stakeholders in town are asking for a prominent, well-built building that will help revitalize the downtown. So compromising on the aesthetics, say that using a different kind of brick or block, I'm not in favor of, because that goes against one of the primary reasons why the implementation committee and the other groups are pushing us to do a quality building that we'll be proud of. And that I'm reluctant to approve of a cost savings that diminishes the long-standing quality and functionality of the building.
Well said, Tom. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree.
Janet, did I see your hand up?
No, I was just gonna, I know this is a small point. I'm just trying to think of timing for some of these decisions. I know our cost estimator is swamped right now. I can't even get him to do an update on a construction project that is cost less than $1 million right now. We have him scheduled to do the design development. I don't even know if we could get him to even help us figure out these pieces. It takes more time than you think to pull these pieces apart. Just so you know, I'd have to make a call and see if he's even available to help us right now. Just it's a small thing, but I can't make magic out of a cost estimate that I can't pull this myself, like pull it apart. So if we could figure out what those other items would be,
I think that's a good idea.
so like I could say to him, like, you know, okay, we want to figure out what these monitors cost. We want to understand what X costs or Y costs. Then I can give him something to work with, you know, sort of thing. So, and then he can figure out how much time he needs to actually do it. And then he can figure out if he can find a slot in his schedule. Because we book his time out months in advance. I mean, you know, he gets a schedule and he blocks out time for these projects. So that's one thing I'm worried about. So,
Thank you.
so
Does anyone else have concerns? The monitors seem to be a concern that maybe.
It's just an example of a concern. The bigger concern is not going through a process to look at opportunities for savings and understanding the pros and cons. Removing or changing something has ramifications. We should know the dollar amount, we should know the ramification and make a decision. And I remain at a loss that we haven't been able to do that. And if I'm the only one on the board that feels that way, then I'd say it's not worth our consultants' time to do anything with it. But that's how I feel.
Comments from the board?
Mitch, I just want to we do own VE process, but it's not now. It was after. So I just want to say we do own that. You know, we had thought that if you need it, we have it as a supplemental service, I think, perhaps, but it's definitely in there. So it's not like we haven't talked about it. You know, they find more value in the pre-qualification. I mean, not the pre-qualification, the reconciliation. So that's where you figure out, you know, if there's big jumps in the money there, that's really very helpful to know. So
what are the types of things that you can make decisions on during that later VE process?
Well, they all have ramifications for time. So if you know, like you were saying, if you had
well, time will get you anything.
Well, I know, but I mean, we're working for time, and so if we have to change all the exterior materials, you know, for instance, and I think Amy and I have written down, you know, like if you change from masonry, you have masonry ties that support it. If you use a hardy, then you're going to have like a night wall system, a rain screen system. They are different cost points. So we'd have to prepare two separate sets of wall sections that then the cost estimator can look at. You know, we'd have to design it separately and get some agreement on what that design was, because we have a very distinct design that has, you know, masonry and arches and all things like that. I don't know if you would, you know, just simply take out all the masonry and put, you know, hardy board in, for instance, or a metal siding, for instance, or whatever it happens to be. I don't think it's like a it's not like you're not switching out a material without affecting the design, in my opinion. Amy, I don't know what you think about that, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're struggling with is, you know, it's sort of what Diana said. I mean, typically if a client tells us, you know, we've got $20 million to spend, then we design with that in mind and we design to that target. And if the number comes in higher at the cost estimate, then if it comes in at 22 million, we know we need to cut 2 million out, and we can put a list of recommendations forward for what that 2 million might be. We don't have a target here, so we don't know. Are we looking to cut $100,000? Are we looking to cut $1 million? Are we looking to cut $2 million? We don't really know where you are there. So we're having a hard time, you know, coming up with ideas for what you might look at, and where it would be easier to cut them out and where it might be harder to cut them out. So I don't know if the committee has thought that through at all and has any ideas on what that might be.
And I think the one thing is we all know that you know, if you cut a square foot out of each room, you know, or something, you don't get the whole value back. Mechanical systems don't change, the structure doesn't change. If you want to cut significant dollars out of this project, you have to cut out, say, an entire bay of the apparatus.
As I said before, my goal
Yeah, so
is not to cut the cost of the project. My goal is to make sure we're spending our money as efficiently as possible
mhm.
and look for opportunities for savings countered by the pro or con for that change. And you know, Diana, you've got your hand up. Hopefully you'll get recognized soon.
I did recognize her.
Oh,
Okay. Yeah, I just want to reiterate again what I said last time. It's not that I don't think we should look with a very close eye at the cost of the building, but we are doing a disservice to ourselves if we start slashing big pieces of the program or the operational functionality of the station right now. It is possible that by the time we get to the DD estimate or the CD estimate, construction costs in certain trades may have dropped. And at that point, we're going to be like, oh, we took, you know, XYZ out. That hasn't been designed, hasn't been advanced. We don't have access to that anymore, really. Then we're asking them to go back and basically redesign a second time. So I think timing is really an important part of when we decide to cut things out of the project. And I just still feel like it's too early. We're going to make a much more informed set of decisions with the design development estimate because more things were drawn, like the steel will be itemized, and you have a second estimator on it. So that really helps nail down certain things that are in question that right now we have, you know, I mean, we have a good estimator on the architect's team, but reconciliations always present a lot of interesting choices or highlight aspects of the project that maybe were not as clear. So I think, again, I think it's in our interest to hold on to as much of the design as we can right now, and then make a more informed decision in design development.
And I believe that I agree with following your lead, Diana. Not being a person that does this ever in my life. It's like, it makes sense to go forward with what we have right now and what we hope we're going to be able to continue with. I'm concerned with the talk of changing the outside of the building. I don't think that that was ever anything that we really ever wanted to do. So I'm not sure if we can make a decision on that tonight, or if we can just.
I haven't presented any. I mean, from my perspective, I'm fine with the exterior of the building as
I'll
discussed.
agree on that so that at least the architects can go forward with that.
You're talking about exterior materials.
Exterior materials.
Yeah, I mean, we decided on that last meeting.
And the overhead doors, I had questions, and it's like, we had a question page, and looking at that, there's some questions that it seems like we should make a definite decision on. We want the bifold doors, or we don't, and we should make a decision on the exterior materials.
Or we could look at this chart and give the immediate response to the ones that are critical, like number 11 and number 13, and just say, no, we're not moving the building. No, we're not removing parking. No, we're not going to use a straight retaining wall. No, we're not going to eliminate the snow melt. I mean, we can answer those.
Okay, I think that sounds like the way to go. Let's start forward. And I don't have that, right? That was right here. You know.
I don't want to beat it that one thing, Chair. I don't want to beat a dead horse on the monitors, but we have no windows in the building other than the monitors, and the small amount of glass in the doors. So we tend to, you know, if we have no monitors, we'll have no natural light except for the doors. I don't know, Amy and Mark, we might want to rethink that and put some clerestory windows in the building to get some light into the space, natural light, which the monitors do. So I thought about that as we were cutting them out.
Good part of the discussion over
yeah,
the cost and impact of monitors versus other options.
Yeah. Okay.
again, without knowing what the dollar amount looks like, it's frivolous to have the conversation.
All right, so Janet, you want to prioritize the numbers and we can, the ones that you.
Let's see. Let's see. Item number 3 is, any plan changes, and I don't think we're gonna, from what we heard tonight, we're not going to have plan changes. Is that correct? Because that is a big thing. That's what we were just talking about. We're gonna cut something, for square footage. And then number 11 we've talked about, which is the moving the building, and then number 12, which is the public moving public spaces out of picking up the 2 to 3 feet. I think we've heard about that. The straight walls versus the batter walls, that is up for discussion. I think Tom, you just spoke against that or changing that to all straights, back to straight.
Well, it's on the list.
Yeah, no. It's the civil engineers use the batter walls on the southern elevation for the planning board submission. They were very concerned that we make a decision on that one, which we made so that they can finish the drawings. And I think it all has to do with how their stormwater systems work and everything. So I'm not going to change that right now unless I hear differently. The snow melt areas, again, they were submitted with the civil. We're not sure how much they get affected by the planning board. That was the one we don't know. We can obviously take them out. That might change their calculations for some reason.
I'm sorry, what number
don't
are you
know.
on?
Number 15, or 16, sorry, 16, which is the snow melt. I think Amy, I think we had like 20 feet, maybe. I can't remember the dimension there. So we'd have to check with the
Yes.
submission. But anyhow,
Leave, Janet, it was originally 25, it was reduced to 10.
yeah. So,
I
and
think
on
we
the-
might have had 20 in the cost estimate, but
20
I
in the cost, yeah.
I
so
think it was 20.
I was wondering what went to the planning board, I thought was 10, but I could be wrong.
okay, it could have, there's so much paper gets passed on
Yeah.
remittances. Let's see. And then we talked about the overall square footage, and we're not going to do that right now. We talked about the roof monitors. Okay, so we'll see what we can find out about that one. Then the flat roof, changing to a flat roof. We just started, you don't want to change the architecture right now, so we won't be doing that one. Alternate roofing materials. So the detail is very different for the roof details. So you guys voted on a standing seam roof for lots of good reasons. But we do know there's a savings if you go to shingles. So it was a deduct of, Amy, do you remember? I want to say it was like 35,000. It was a smaller amount, smaller than you think. But Amy will look that up right now. The decks on the back of the building, we are not recommending you move the deck from outside the living spaces of the fire department. It's
Sorry,
that.
can you continue to use the numbers because we're.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is number 25. Which we had decks behind in the back of the building on the south elevations by the fitness room and by the living spaces. We don't recommend you taking out the one by the living spaces. The fire department having an outdoor space there, they're going to grill. They're gonna, they're gonna eat outside. If they have to go downstairs to do that and out the back door, that would be their choice. So we're not recommending that. If you want to take it out of the around the fitness room, you could. We'll have to put roof, we're going to take, it's not a lot we're taking out. We're probably going to have to still get access to that roof to maintain it. So maybe by a ladder or a door onto it anyhow. So, but we could do it. It's a small amount. We're essentially taking out the pavers. And so the savings is minimal. Roof screens, we put the roof screens as an allowance right now. That's item number 26 because you know, there was a lot of concern about what you're going to see of the rooftop equipment. With the geothermal system, I think you have the least amount of rooftop equipment, right, Amy? I think pretty much. So maybe the building will screen it enough, but it's an allowance right now. And it's really until we get everything laid out, what can you see from where? It's not an element, but I do want to let you know about that. The pergolas versus the pergolas came from the design review committee suggesting that we look into it. So we had it priced. If we take them out, I mean, if we're going to detail them, we want to detail them into the structure. So we don't want you trying to attach something at a later date if we want to do it now. We are recommending something there to shade the immediate area right outside the area so that it doesn't beat down sun into the space and maybe affect the mechanical systems, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be good. But again, you can leave the pergola out, definitely out of the fitness room section, for instance, for sure. And we can cut back. The other option is just cut back the pergola, which is probably more architecturally sensitive to a light shelf off of the top of a window or something like that, like you would see. We would recommend maybe cutting the pergola back as an option. So something like that.
On the pergola, if I
Yep.
could, we got a follow-up memo from the design review committee that said they didn't explicitly recommend pergola. I just want to reflect that memo in the
Yes.
conversation. I think
Yes.
what is, and I don't remember if I watched this meeting or not, but I think a member of the design review brought up the suggestion of having some sort of sun screening,
Right.
and somehow through the interpretive process that turned into the assumption of a requirement from design review. I think that, the firefighters and the staff should have something that shades for the sun.
Okay.
I've always questioned how well pergolas shade from the sun, unless they're, covered, across the whole top. I don't know exactly what you're designing there. I imagine that's a reasonable amount of money, but not millions.
Oh, no.
And
It's not millions.
I don't know how that is relative to the cost of other options, such as, a canopy or umbrellas or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we put it in again as another allowance. We had pergolas a long time ago in the plans. We took them out and then we put them back in, when they brought it up. So they kept coming and going along the way. So there's a lot of confusion perhaps on that one, but we do think it's valuable on that south side to have something for the area. It'll probably help with if not, if there's sun beaten down, they're gonna be pulling the shades down all the time, and then they're not gonna have light in there, and if it's too bright. So we're recommending a partial, and I think it's like a good in between decision. And again, we can take them out of the fitness room for sure, to cut a little bit of cost there. So
while we're on this, given that
Yeah.
this is an item that you say you need a decision on the next 2 weeks,
Yeah.
I'm very curious to hear from Diana and Tom as architects on what they think about pergola versus anything else there. And I would tend to lean towards their recommendation, whatever it is.
I would take the pergolas out.
They do provide some screening at the high point of the sun's angle, like 70 degrees at June 21. But for earlier afternoon they're not going to provide much screening unless maybe you grew some wisteria or grapevines over them.
do you have a suggestion on an alternate shading for that back area? And if it's not a pergola, it's something else.
Or maybe a retractable awning? You can get motorized or manual, like
Mhm.
I think they're called Sunbrella is one manufacturer. The brighter colors fade the fastest, obviously, so they might need maintenance and be changed out, but that's a less expensive shading device, and you could just roll it into its enclosure during the winter months.
Could you
Diane?
do as kind of a structure that you have a kind of translucent material that goes over so that there's no moving parts that have to be maintained over. I just imagine those, you get caught in the wind when it's open and the hinges are shot or something like with a umbrella or something like an awning. But if you had kind of a structure like the pergola, but we'll call it pergola light, and you put over a material that, you know, designed to provide some sort of screening, that way it's no moving parts. If it gets worn out, you buy a new tarp or whatever the material is.
I mean, there are numerous options besides a pergola. It's just architecturally, we spend a lot of time talking about what this building looks like, and I tend to think pergolas are not really in line with the architectural concept. I mean, it depends on how you treat the glazing, like the shape of the windows, the spec of the glass. You could put on something that's more permanent, that's still somewhat like an awning. That's not going to blow away, as you're pointing out, Tim.
Just if I may, from an operational standpoint, I'm really not real keen on putting umbrellas out there. They will blow away. We can't control it. If we're out running calls, we can't have someone go back and make sure they take the umbrella down and it doesn't get blown away and get blown out right in the middle of the street. I would like some kind of a permanent thing there. What it is, I don't know. And I agree with Janet. I think the one off of the training room can be removed. I don't think that's a big deal, but I think the other one really should be there of some sort, whether it's a pergola or it's a whatever, something else there.
I think we'll look at something else. Not a pergola. I mean, I think we'll look at and some other options and see what's out there. So
Thank you, Janet.
because, okay. All right. Where were we? There was a question about the radiant floors and the aprons. So we recommend radiant floors. I think the fire department would prefer it. Takes a bit longer to heat up for the cold start, but it's a very efficient system for a fire department. They work close to the ground there and everything. So as for the snow melt, again, we talked about that already. You can leave it out. You can put it in. Not all fire stations have them, that's for sure. You have a north-facing apparatus base as your primary. That's when you really, really want some snow melt, because the snow piles up against the door, and then there's little bumps, and every time the trucks drive over that, they're doing that bumps thing and trying to clear out that entry. But it's entirely up to you about the snow melt. But we do recommend the radiant floors, and the mechanical engineers will want to know that because they need to design it.
Is that something we should talk about now? I mean, I can tell you from the chief's perspective, I'd like the radiant floors. The guys are out there a lot. They're working on those. They're out there all day long in the winter, and it's just nice to have the warm floors.
Can we agree on that?
So that's in the apparatus bays only, or throughout
Yes.
the first floor? Just the apparatus?
It's
I
just
think
the
it's all
apparatus. Yeah. I mean, somebody suggested, putting it, or somebody said something about putting it all through the first floor would be great, but I think we only ever put them in on the major apparatus floor. So
Everybody by agreement, we can let that go and go with it.
I agree.
Again, it's hard. I happen to really like radiant floors. I wish that I had them in my house, and I think they make perfect sense in the apparatus bay. It's really hard for me to make that decision definite without having some dollar amount associated with it, which we don't have. So, yeah.
well, I'm going to collect some of these and see if I can get some answers to you, Mitch, sooner than later, if we can figure that out. We talked about alternate to the brick veneer.
I'm
And
sorry.
we said
Back to the apron.
Yeah.
The
yes.
radiant
Oh, the apron. Yes.
underneath the apron. I think that does make sense to some extent on the, right outside the doors. You're designing for how many feet outside?
10 feet.
10
We, the cost estimate, I believe, was for 20 or 25, but we had talked to the chief about 10 feet.
Okay. So we don't know how much money we've saved by that, but we've saved something. And the chief's okay with it, so, yeah. Good.
It's really,
And I agree, I was gonna say minimum 10 feet anyway.
it's really what's up against those first 10 feet is really the critical part. You know, yeah, you could do I've seen whole aprons. I think that's nuts. It costs a fortune to do that, and I don't see any, you know, but that first 10 feet is really, you know, the critical part for us.
Okay, done.
Does the
Yes.
grease trap fall just outside the apparatus doors and will be enclosed by these heated pad?
Uh,
It depends. I don't know where it is yet.
yeah, I don't think we've located it yet, or certainly not coordinated it with the HVAC yet, but you know, we would
Could
try
be.
to locate it beyond probably.
Right. But we did a really deep, challenging site. So we did the entire apparatus apron, which was about 25 feet or so, Amy, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And everything sat within it. And, you know, it was just a coordination event, you know,
Yeah.
so, it wasn't fun. I have to say, that coordination meeting, but, you know, we were able to do it. So I think, you know, what was your concern there?
Well, a linear exterior drain is surrounded by radiant heat. So you have a source of, you're trapping water and you're also adding heat. So you don't want it to compound the problems at the door.
Yep. Okay. Let's see. Again, we're not going to change the materials of the brick, and that was the decision that everybody's sort of made tonight. So that's items 30 and 31. 32 is removing the arches on the facade, and I think we heard that tonight, that we won't be doing that because that would change all the architecture. The zinc panels, we made a decision on that. That was by talking last week. And we talked about the apparatus bays already. And let's see. Consider use of the VFR HVAC options. Well, you made a decision tonight on that one. So there seemed to be, Mitch, two of them in my mind that you felt like you needed more money things on, and that was the radiant and the roof monitors. Is that a good? Does anybody have anything else that they and then we didn't you know, we didn't talk to John. John, you had quite a few questions. You know, some of them involved money, some of them didn't. Well, they all involved money because you went straight to the estimate. But were there any things that surprised you or you had questions about? I want to make sure we bring those up to Al. John had I don't know how many items he had here.
Madam Chair, may I?
Go ahead.
So there was a line item for earthwork export. There's actually two of them, 1.6 million, and then somewhere later on, about 800,000. Was one a subset of the other? I couldn't tell from that. On pages 5, site work, and 17, it's repeated.
Yeah. So sometimes when you were looking, John, at the estimate, you were reading the summary page, and the summary page is made up of pieces that are grabbed from the longer spreadsheet. So you look at the numbers. So you kind of have to dig into both of them. And so it's probably all, you know, if the first one came from, and I'm going to pull it out here, the first one came from that summary page, the later one came from the estimate itself, the detail part of the estimate. So I don't know. I think the earthwork number, there was an $800,000 number, but there was more earthwork. Let me see if I can.
It was 789. Yeah.
So there's a bigger issue with the earthwork, you know, that we'll be, I don't know, talking about. Yeah.
I'm wondering if it would help if we pulled up a copy of the estimate and sort of explained a little bit about the way an estimate is organized, so that because I think some of your questions, John, are just about how things are summarized in different places. And
right.
let me just find it.
It took me, You have to track things down, like miscellaneous metals.
Yeah.
Is throughout the whole project, so you have to
Yeah.
search all the pieces and add them up.
Yeah.
You know, things like
I
that.
want to make
And-
sure
yeah.
we're not repetitive in
Oh,
terms
no,
of, you know,
I don't think there
if
are.
there's, yeah, I just want to clarify that. That's all.
Okay, yeah. So Amy, you wanna,
Is it okay if I share my screen?
Yeah.
Let me see. Can you see the estimate?
yes, we can.
Okay. So I'm just gonna scroll through. So this first page here were the alternates that we had, the cost estimator price. And those were items 1 through 15, which you saw summarized before. These are just his exclusions, assumptions, a little bit more information about how he does it. So then you've got several pages of summary, and this first few pages here are in CSI format. So CSI format's Construction Specifications Institute format, and it divides the project into these different divisions. So everything in Division 3 is related to concrete, masonry is Division 4, metals Division 5. Within each of these divisions, there are further breakdowns for items. So you see here, Division 7 is thermal and moisture protection, and that ranges from, you know, insulation and air vapor barriers and sealants to, you know, the roofing and the roofing system. So for each of these, there's a number, and those numbers you'll find are repeated throughout the estimate, and you have to kind of go look. So thermal insulation here is 072100. And if I scroll ahead a few pages here and I go to let's go to, you know, roof construction here. You see,
Amy, can you enlarge that a little bit? I don't know if it's
maybe.
tiny. Yeah, I don't know.
Let's see. If you go to
that's
roof
better.
construction, you see rigid insulation here. If you go to exterior walls here, you've got roof insulation here again, and those numbers repeat them. So when you look at the summary number, the 07210, he's going through each of these line items and adding it up and pulling it out from different sections in the backup. So that's one way it's organized with this CSI format. And so you'll get one number here, for thermal insulation, the $224,600. It's all those little pieces throughout the estimate that are summarized in this one number. Then when you go past it, he summarizes all of his CSI formats, and he puts on all of his overhead and profits and general conditions and everything to get the total here. He gives you a different way to break it down with uniformat construction cost summary. And here it's broken down by building systems. So you see A10 is foundations and slabs, B10 superstructure, B20 exterior closure. So those summaries are coming from the estimate in a different place. So if you look here, again in the backup, here's A10 building foundations, and under A10 are all these different numbers here, and you get to a total for A10 here, total foundations, 1,587,000, and that is the number you've got up here on this summary. Okay, so you've got.
I thought it was a roll up, but I didn't want to assume that.
Yeah, and he's just
got so
rolling
much
it up
data.
in. He's rolling it up in different ways. So I think
Right.
that's where
Right.
some of your confusion was coming from.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So that's why you have to sort of dig through it to find how to add the different pieces together. And I
Right.
hope we tried to make that clear, or I tried to make that clear as we do it, because I was digging into the thing and saying, oh, I know he didn't add this thing and this thing to get this number, you know. So you might have asked the same question in two spots,
Right. Yeah.
but it's the same answer in essence, particular things about the bolt resistant specialties.
Right.
There were two items.
Right.
that were-
Janet, under
yeah.
contingency,
Yes.
have we reduced that from a 10% contingency to 5% or
No.
something else?
No, so the design and pricing contingency is still a 10%. That will not change at this phase.
Okay.
You know, eventually you want to, that 2.6 million, we'd love to get rid of that and say we're not going to spend that. But the more reality is that as the detail estimate goes to the next phase, it'll start reducing that 10%, but that 2.66 will be absorbed into all the other categories. So that's what it's there for right now. And you don't
Okay.
change that. What we changed, I think what you're thinking of is we changed the construction contingency from 6.5 to 5%.
Okay.
That's what we changed at a meeting. So no, you don't change at this point the design and pricing. It's too early.
Yeah, it is confusing.
Yeah.
This estimate is for the hard costs for the building.
Yes,
And
yes.
so the design contingency is a contingency to account for the things that aren't designed yet.
Don't
This
know
is
about-
a
yeah.
very, this is schematic design. They
Yep.
know that you have to flush out the design more. They don't just, they kind of know what, through the narratives, what the intent is, but they don't have everything. So they put a relatively large contingency of 10% this early on. And as we go to DD and then construction documents, and that 10% number will drop down as we get more further along in the design process.
But it's just as likely that each individual line item will go up. You know,
Exactly.
it'll absorb that 2.66 in all the other categories above it. So that's why, you know, it's a placeholder right now. And maybe it won't, you know, but more likely it will. So, so that's that. What else, John? So that'll explain if you read the list now that Amy went through. I'm glad you did that, Amy. That was really helpful. You can see what we did. I tried to tell you where to look for things.
Right.
And then there's a lot of line items in this one, you know, like miscellaneous equipment. There was a 30,000. There's allowance for installation of the equipment that the GC will remove from the existing station and reinstall gear washers on the equipment. And it's based on 200 hours of labor. So that if you read the further description further on, it says exactly that. It'll describe what he's doing. And we have line items in this right now. Again, not defined. So there are lump sum items in this. There are line items. There are based on hours. There's a whole range of categories. So don't discount that when you're looking at it, because especially with these allowances, and that some are allowances, some are based on square foot counts, you know, $2 a square foot, $4 a square foot, 50 cents a square foot. So things like sealants. Well, you know, every time you have dissimilar materials, you have a sealant. They don't know how many materials are going to be yet, but they know how big the building is. And so they do it based on 30,000 square feet, even though there's a huge chunk of it that's a big open space, you know, but there's enough detail in the smaller spaces to warrant that.
Okay.
Okay, so that might help that. Miscellaneous metals.
Chief, why do we need 3 fire hydrants?
I think Gina did a fairly good job explaining the spacing that's required under NFPA.
Yeah. So there's a requirement about putting them in civil engineers, and then once there's a fire, we'll do a flow test that will kind of tell it the whole story. And so it could be reduced. So right now we have one at the far end of the site, on each far end, east to west, and one in the rear.
And one in the rear is one of our town regulations is you have to have a hydrant within 100 feet of the fire department connection.
Okay.
I enforce that with everybody that puts in a building that's sprinkled. So I can't enforce it for everyone and say, except for us.
The fire, yeah. I figured it was related to that, but I asked the question anyway.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no, it's a good question. The one other quick question you asked about was miscellaneous metals. It's the bane of an architect's existence, public bid. The miscellaneous, because it is truly miscellaneous. It's not the structural steel, and it's not like a metal panel on the outside of the building, but it's all the other metal you'll see in a building that's hidden. Most of it's hidden. It's loose lintels and angles and steel framing supports for, you know, a cabinet. It's all that kind of stuff, and that is a fouled sub-big category, and we have to try to name every single product in a building in that list. So it's really hard, and but that's, so again, you know, he's doing a guess right now of what it is. So it's not a small number by any stretch of the imagination. It's not small, but what you'll see, John, is you'll see it sprinkled throughout, you know, the sections. There'll be miscellaneous metals for this category and miscellaneous metals for that category. When you add them all up, it's a total of 564,000, not the 123,000 that you noted in on your first page, because that was only one piece of it. So you need to look at all.
Got it. Okay.
I think, we're talking about, things, BDA, you asked what a BDA, that is a,
The bidirectional antenna.
bidirectional amplifier.
Okay.
And we won't know, exactly, but so do a placeholder in that. So,
The one thing with the BDA, John, is that it's cheaper to install the chases for it while you're building than to go back and say, oh no, we need to put it in now. So
Got it. Yep. Okay, thanks.
and we might not know that until we, have
You
the
won't know
building
it,
sort
yeah.
of framed up,
Mhm.
and then you can test. You asked, there's a code thing about the energy charging provisions that's Massachusetts Stretch Energy Code. So the table is there, and it tells you exactly what you have to do there.
So that, how do you compute 11? It's an odd number,
yeah.
literally.
It's 20% of the parking spaces that we are providing. So you just count up the number of spaces. And I think that
round up.
it came to, yeah, I think it came to 10 point something, and you have to round up.
Okay.
Yep. Granite curbs you ask about. We don't do Cape Cod berms. Bituminous, they fall apart. They have to replace. But these big trucks hitting them, I mean, we only do granite curbs. I don't know what else to say about that.
Where would these physically be?
Wherever we call for curbing. So if they call for curbing, to direct water, to move it, to edge things, then it's going to be granite. I haven't done a Cape Cod berm. I don't even know how long to do them anymore, but we don't do it.
Fire stations, they don't.
Yeah, they don't hold up over the top. This is not like a little resident, where you're gonna be able to do it. These are big trucks rolling out, lots of vehicles. Don't recommend it at all.
I guarantee they get hit.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Yeah. So we talked about the hydrants. And we talked about the contingency. So you can look through this, but I think, you've got a lot of the same kind of comments, miscellaneous stuff. How did that
I'll take a look at it
and-
again, and
Yeah, take a
especially with your comments back. Thank you, your
Yeah.
responses.
And then Tom, Amy, you want to take Tom's comments? I just want to make sure everybody's has a chance to get their comments
I
noted.
apologize. These are more like design development questions. I kind of
That's okay. That's okay. So
I'm looking at the budget, say, well, what does this mean? What does this mean?
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if you had a chance to read the responses. Let's see, trying to open it. Oh, so you asked about if the soil tests indicate that there's no groundwater in the building footprint, can we eliminate the waterproofing and damp proofing of the frost wall? There are some code regulations for waterproofing and damp proofing. So, we'll have to see what, the testing finds, and then we'll discuss with the engineers the next steps. Provide the PSI for the 5-inch and 8-inch floor slabs. They're both 4,000 PSI for concrete. That's typically what the engineers do for these floors. Does the rigid insulation extend 4 feet vertically or horizontally, or both? The cost estimate assumed 4 feet vertically. We're still working on the wall sections. So we'll be looking at that and seeing if we do it 4 feet.
It might help in the apparatus bay where we have radiant slabs to also go horizontally.
Oh, that'll have its own.
So we are required, to
Uh,
have continuous insulation under wherever we do the radiant. So yes,
I don't know if
we will
it's
be doing that.
R5 or R10. 5.
I think it just changed. I just looked at this recently. I can't remember. It just changed, I think, so
Okay.
it was a little bit
You
higher
mean
than
R10, mean you need a 2-inch rigid insulation under the entire slab?
I don't know that it's R10. As I say, I think the value that they required just changed. So we got to double check it. I think it was actually somewhere between 5 and 10, which was kind of strange.
I know it used to be 5 because when COVID hit, they stopped making 5. They only made 10. They only could make 1. So we had to pay extra because you couldn't get 5 anywhere. So
none of the manufacturers were making 1 inch
5.
at that point. So
they had to go big. So who knows what happened there? Okay.
Are the interior wood doors solid core at 1 3/4 inches thick? Yes.
So the ICC 2021 Zone 5 heated slabs R15 for 36 inches below and R5 for the full slab.
Is that the commercial?
Yes. Table C 402.1.3.
Okay.
No, well, don't worry, we will check because
Yeah.
we have
Okay.
a lot of code stuff to do with it.
I just happen to have
things.
it sitting on my
Yeah,
desk.
yeah, okay.
Okay. You asked, can we avoid plastic laminate and particle board for the cabinetry? These lack durability and outgas as they age. And I said we can discuss the options. The cost estimate assumed plastic laminate upper and lower cabinets with quartz countertops in most areas within the administration and living quarter wing. The specs typically call for AWI certification program and AWI custom grade materials and workmanship. That's, Woodworking Institute, our regulated program that has certain standards for what the shops provide. It's a good program for coming up with a certain quality.
But they don't address the health of the interior atmosphere of the building. They only talk about the fabrication.
Yeah.
So if we're concerned about the health and safety of the firefighters, we want to make sure when they come back from an event that they're in a safe, healthy environment. And that includes being careful with restricting the amount of particle board and other materials that outgas, like laminates.
Yeah, we oftentimes include in the specifications, no added urea formaldehyde and certainly other VOCs. But we can talk about other options if you're interested in other options, certainly.
Were you thinking of something in particular, Tom?
Well, wood, natural products as much as possible, if we can afford it.
I agree with wood.
I agree with durable.
Durable wood.
Well, depends on which wood you use.
Yeah, it has to be refinished. That's over time. That's the one issue. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not maintenance free, certainly.
And it might be more expensive, but we'll have to look at that. Okay.
But the overall amount of millwork is not huge
No,
in the scheme of things. And I guess my sense is always that laminate is not great over time in terms of maintenance and harder to, repair.
Okay. So you asked about the resinous coating for the apparatus bays. Could the floor slab be sealed with a non-slip substitute? Right now, we were showing resinous flooring in the apparatus bays and certain surrounding areas like the decon laundry room, SCBA room. We find generally that the fire departments prefer the resinous flooring. We have done stations where we do sealed concrete with a troweled finish for slip resistance. It's always a trick to sort of get just the right finish on the concrete so that it is slip resistant. And to be perfectly honest, in public construction, the finish of the concrete isn't always that aesthetically pleasing. So sometimes having the epoxy over it hides a multitude of sins, to be honest.
and we want to make sure that whatever finish it has, it's not something that'll collect a lot of grit. If it's really a bad job, the ridges and it gets dirty quickly. So,
Yeah.
Fire department does prefer the resin coating. It's sharper looking, it's cleaner. It's non-slip. It's the stations I've been in that have them it's outstanding. I like it.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay. And then you asked, can we replace the gas range with an electric oven and induction cooktop? And this is something that we actually wanted to talk. We were just talking about it in our office the other day, because as you heard Dom say last time we met, we can't bring a gas line into the building without having an impact on possible utility incentives. So a lot of times the fire departments want to have a gas range, but that would be potentially an issue here. So we hadn't discussed that with the chief yet. And I don't know if you picked up on that last week when we had that discussion with Dom.
I did. Good question though, is that natural gas or does that include propane as well?
I don't know the answer to that. We can look into that.
It's the mixed fuel scenario that reduces your rebates.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
not-
mean, I think you're probably right that it's all fossil fuels, but we can certainly ask the question.
Right.
Because I think you'd still want to have a grill. A lot of times we do a gas line to a grill, but in this case, you'd have a propane tank to a
Right.
grill. But that probably doesn't count anyway because it's not part of the building.
If we went with the induction as has been spoken of, number one, there's a big cost with the pots and pans that go with that, right? So we'd have to, there'd be an investment there. We would, we're hoping to get a commercial size, because, we have 5 to 7 people trying to have dinner. It's hard when you have a little residential, and I don't know if they make induction in that size. Do you guys know that? If not, we'd have to have side by side probably.
I just put a
And-
big commercial kitchen in somewhere and it's all gas, but it wasn't Massachusetts. So,
So it's
but
just
you have to look
something,
into
if we went with induction, we'd put them side by side. That way we'd have 2 ovens and, have the ability to do, and the ability for him to have a griddle on top as well.
I'll donate the appliance pots and pans to you, Chief.
You're a nice guy.
Makes you want to rethink the geothermal though.
Tom, did you have an induction oven and you hated it and you bought the pots and now you're donating them?
No,
My brother has an induction oven, and I hate when I go over there and I'm trying to cook with him. I hate using it.
We have induction. We love it.
Yeah, oh God.
Takes a while to get,
I think it's just because I use it rarely, so when I do try to do it, I'm like, how's this darn thing work? So,
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that was Tom. That was John, and then all the other questions came from a variety of people. Mitch, and certainly there was some from Tim Alex in there, and the deputy chief, and
Diana
anybody.
had a couple in there.
Yeah, so there's questions from a lot of people. So Mitch, did I summarize it good for the two things? Again, now we're through all of them now. It's still down to those 2 things, the radiant, the question on the radiant floors. I assume that was the floors, not the aprons or whatever. I don't know which one that was. And then the roof monitors. Are those your 2 biggest concerns right now from what we talked?
They are things that I would love to know the cost on. We've talked about the advantages, particularly of the radiant floors, and I think we should have radiant floors. It would be helpful to know what the cost is. Obviously, you'd have to replace it with something else. So that's, my gut feeling is there probably isn't a lot of savings there, but I think some of that comes from community perception of radiant floors being a luxury item, and which it is in some situations.
Right.
I would not imagine it is in a large concrete floor. I imagine it is simply a good way to heat, and not being a luxury item. So I don't have great concerns about that.
Well, I can talk to Dom and get a something else on that.
Ballpark.
I have to talk to Dom first, like what's he putting in place, and then talk to the estimator. Okay, I'll see what I can do. I can't promise the timing, but I will make an attempt at it. So and see what happens. So
I
appreciate
appreciate going to the cost estimate. I had one question that falls way back to the very beginning of that, where John had asked about the earth removal, the $789,000 there, which I know what that is. My assumption is that's for the truck to get all the dirt that is removed from the site and bring it someplace. And I know that has to happen. I think the question is there an opportunity for substantive savings if we find the place? If there's somewhere in town versus we might not be able to. And I am sure that's not a decision that needs to be made now. That's a decision,
And I imagine if you had a place to put it, I think there's a bigger, more complicated story about earth removal. But if you had a local place and you weren't paying, like you're filling in a big hole somewhere, I don't know where that would be, but you're filling in then I assume that you're still gonna. They're doing all the removal, but they're just not transpointing at a distance and paying the licensing or whatever it takes to dump soil. So yeah, they're probably, I mean, my gut guess is yes, there'd be some savings there. What it would be, I don't know. Depends on where it is, how difficult it is to dump, you know, do we have to get it permitted to dump it there? I did have a project once where they decided to dump in town and they dumped it in a wetlands. That did not go over well, you know, so we got to be really careful. You know, I mean, somebody just was really trying to hide what they were doing.
The land that I'm mentioning is something that the town is considering purchasing at the upcoming town meeting, and it's a large site that will remain unused. I'm sure there are significant pros and cons about doing it there, but it's come up a few times. Hey, you know, we're gonna have, I forget how many acres this is, you know, 20,
Okay.
40 acres, whatever it is.
23.
Yeah, has plenty of use for it, plenty of land available with, and we're just gonna preserve it. Is that really a good place to put the dirt? I don't know. But I think, you know, that's a question we can toss around internally for the next few months.
Yeah, we don't have to decide that tonight.
So Janet, you have all the answers you need tonight.
I think so. Between Amy and I think we can figure it out. So, you know, the big things I take away is we're not going to try to make the building smaller. We're not changing the materials of the building.
Right.
And so that is to us the big stuff. Like we can continue doing the work we're doing. And that's very helpful. So
Okay.
thank you.
Our next meetings are scheduled 16th and 17th, or 17th and 18th.
It's just the 16th is planning board, the 17th, we'd have a tentative for another one of these, but you guys were gonna get back to me and let me know if we had to have it or not.
Yeah,
If we don't need it, we can do that.
we don't think so, but let's, you know, let's, Amy and I talk. I don't think so, Amy. I we didn't have an agenda for that settled or anything. I mean, we've
Yeah,
had a lot of answers. You guys have been very helpful making some decisions.
Yeah, I can keep it as a holding spot, and our next one after that is May 1st, which makes a lot more sense, so.
Yeah, yeah, because then we have to get your approval to get the estimate, and where I have a schedule here. I'm not at my desk, so
So Mitch,
having a hard time
you
fixing.
do have,
Yeah.
Mitch, I have the 16th and 17th. I won't be here, so you'll be chairing the meeting.
Okay, let me take another look at those to make sure. I know the 17th
School
is
vacation week.
board. 16th is fine.
The 16th is planning board, so that's not a big deal. The 17th is
Yeah.
when the meeting was scheduled.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't
Okay.
I don't see what we're going to talk about. Amy, do you have anything?
Okay.
no, I
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah, I'm available for both of those. For the planning board, I would probably, you know, join in and defer to the experts. And that would be the end of it for
Okay,
that one. And if we meet on the 17th, I'm available. to join.
okay. So any other business that legally can come before the committee? Chief?
I sent you all an email today about the boring results update. Did you all get a chance to read it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Any questions on that I could answer? Or is it just too, it's too early, to be honest with you, to have a bunch of questions, a bunch of answers on it. Finding a petroleum odor was not a surprise. It's what Rob Berger told us we were gonna find. Because of the level that was cleaned up, but he's not overly concerned at this point. We don't really have much until we do some test pits next week and find out a little bit more information. What concerned me more was the fact that they hit steel in 2 spots after they relocated. So what the heck is that? And Rob said, don't worry, that's piping in a drain that we found before. We knew it was there. Here's a picture of it. We dug out underneath it, and we backfilled. I said, okay. He says, I'm 99.99% sure that's what that is, but we're still gonna do a test pit there as well. So we'll have more information as we go along, but I just wanted to keep you all as updated as possible. They hope to have the borings done the end of the week or by Monday at the latest. I've been out there every day that they're doing it just to chat with the guys and say, what'd you find this time? So far it's been sand. I want to go out and find out now that they're out back, I'm going to go out there tomorrow and see what they found out further out back. So, but I just wanted to make sure that you all saw that. And if you had any questions, let me know and I'll follow up with it.
Did they give you an estimate of how long the report would take? after they complete the borings?
No, they did not.
Couple weeks?
Probably. That's my set. That's my.
Yeah, it usually takes them a little while because they have a, you know, a QA, QC process that they go through. But hopefully we'll get a sense of what
Yeah,
they're going to recommend
Right, right,
before the report comes out.
right. We'll get
Do they
a,
make recommendations in terms of soil bearing capacity?
Yeah,
For your
they'll make,
structural
they'll
engineer?
make
they'll make recommendations for foundation design.
foundation, yeah.
The
it's not-
conversation came up today and when they did the remediation, did they pack it? Did they just backfill it? There was
Yeah.
a discussion that came up today.
Yeah, yeah, they didn't actually
They did.
do that. Great. Yes. Diane?
Is the reference to the piping, I mean, are we concerned about that? Do we think that there's any advantage in doing any underground utility scanning before we go out for bid?
You'd have to
Dig
ask the
safe?
experts in that. That's beyond me, Diana.
I think
I-
they're going to do the test pits and see
They're-
where that
Is
starts
that
with.
gonna, okay,
I think,
so if
you
we
know,
find more there that's of concern, then we could
That-
consider that as an option.
yeah.
Okay.
yeah, I think we start with the test pits and sort of see. I think, you know, Rob made a comment that perhaps there were more utilities that they had seen previously. And so that's the only thing. I don't know if he has any other information, Chief, on what else he'd seen previously.
I'm waiting to hear back from him. I had sent him a couple of emails. He sent a picture. I don't know, you guys all got a copy of that picture, I think, that he sent. But he's gonna be there with us next week, so I'll be there, DPW, PAR will be there, and we'll have our own LSP there. And we'll go through it there, and we'll have some better answers.
So Dig Safe has already checked the site?
DigSafe checked it when we did the last remediation, but we'll be following up with them as well.
Okay,
Scott's already on that.
all right.
I think they did when they put the signage.
It wasn't a clean site. We all knew that. So now we have to figure out.
Did
You
you all
know.
see the new proposed sign that's up?
Hmm.
Is that big enough?
I can read it.
Okay. Any other business that legally can come before the committee? Hearing
Nope.
none, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Do I hear a
Second,
Okay, Diana,
aye.
Tom,
Yes?
Mitch,
Aye.
Dan,
Yes,
Chief,
Yep.
John, aye. Motion's made and we're
thank
adjourned.
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night,
Thank you all.
everybody.
Good night.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everybody.